Air Force pilot Lieutenant Colonel William F. Smith, Jr. flew above New York City in a blindingly dense fog. Disoriented by the haze, Captain Smith mistook his position and took a wrong turn around the Chrysler Building. He quickly and unexpectedly found himself flying among the world-renowned skyscrapers of Manhattan. With no chance to correct his course, the B-25 smashed into the side of the Empire State Building, tearing an immense hole in the side of the structure and severing the cables of an elevator 80 stories above the ground. An English day if I ever saw one is what Captain Smith was alleged to have said to his wife on the morning of the flight, July 28, 1945. He would be piloting the bomber plane from Bedford, Massachusetts Army Airfield en route to LaGuardia Airport in New York City. It was a routine flight for someone with the background Captain Smith had, a seasoned Air Force pilot who flew more than 50 missions in Europe during the Second World War. He was no stranger to flying in poor weather conditions. As Captain Smith entered the airspace above New York City, the fog was intense and visibility was deteriorating rapidly. To make matters more challenging, he was not familiar with the city's layout, as he had never flown above it. It's said that Captain Smith mistook Roosevelt Island, at the time known as Welfare Island, for Manhattan, so Captain Smith believed he was clear of Manhattan, but it was now directly ahead in his flight path. Smith was now flying precariously low over New York City at 650 feet, an altitude that was lower than the height of about a dozen skyscrapers in the city at that time. After radioing a request for landing, he was denied due to visibility. Instead, he was redirected to Newark Airport in New Jersey. In response, Captain Smith replied sarcastically, "Thank you very much," and ignored the command. He made a turn that unwittingly put him directly over Midtown Manhattan. It was about 9:40 a.m. when the people in the bustling streets below were caught completely by surprise at the bomber jet flying just a few hundred feet above them. They witnessed the plane soaring between the Manhattan skyscrapers, hurtling directly toward the Empire State Building at about 250 miles per hour. By the time the pilot was aware of the error, it was too late. The pedestrians below watched the B-25 turn sharply upward in an attempt to avoid the building. Seconds after disappearing high into the fog, a booming explosion echoed through the streets. Unfortunately, Captain Smith was unable to evade the Empire State Building. His plane tore through the 79th floor, directly hitting the National Catholic Welfare Council's office and, somewhat ironically, the War Relief Service's office. The pedestrians in the street below weren't the only ones in utter shock at the gaping two-story hole now stamped into the side of the building. There were around 1,500 people inside at the time. The occupants included workers in the offices that suffered the direct hit. And just 7 stories up on the observation deck, there were at least 50 sightseers enjoying the view atop the highest floor in the world's tallest building. The explosion was felt for miles around. Some at the time believed it must have been an earthquake. Others feared that New York was being bombed. The Mitchell B-25 bomber was completely destroyed upon impact. Debris hailed down onto the streets of Manhattan. A severed wing plunged into the ground a block away at Madison Avenue. The engines dislodged from the wings of the aircraft. One engine sailed through the building, smashed through the wall on the opposite side, and fell atop a 12-story penthouse art studio, causing it to burn to the ground. The other engine ripped through the interior walls and made its way into an elevator shaft. At the time of impact, elevator attendant Betty Lou Oliver was exiting another elevator on the 80th floor. The force of the crash threw her into the lobby, badly injuring her. Including all 3 individuals aboard the flight, 14 people died in this tragedy. An additional 24, including some first responders, were injured. It was fortunate that the crash took place when it did, as it was Saturday morning. There was only a fraction of the building's typical weekday occupancy. On an average workday, there would have been about 15,000 people in the building, about 10 times the number in the building when the plane struck. Still, there were many people in the building. Flames shot through the elevator shaft that led to the observation deck. The wreck caused people to be set on fire from the jet fuel and completely thrown out of the building. The tower's manager, Frank Powell, guided the terrified guests to safety through the fire exit. Without his heroic efforts, it's plausible that the death and injury toll could have been much higher. Therese Willig, who worked for the Catholic Relief Services office that took the direct hit, described the chaos of the immediate aftermath. In the other side of the office, all I could see was flames. Mr. Fountain was walking through the office when the plane hit the building, and he was on fire. I mean, his clothes were on fire, his head was on fire. 6 of us managed to get into this one office that seemed to be untouched by the fire and close the door before it engulfed us. There was no doubt that the other people must have been killed. In the panic, surely believing there was no other way out, a man by the name of Paul Deering leapt from the building. Over 20 floors down, on the 56th floor, Gloria Paul was thrown across the room. She recalled that it felt like the building was about to topple over. The response was incredible. Emergency personnel were on the scene quickly. In an effort that was nothing short of incredible, the fire was extinguished in only about 40 minutes. Betty Lou Oliver, the elevator attendant who was thrown from the elevator on the 80th floor, was assisted by first responders. They rushed her into an elevator car to get her out of the building. The lift cables in the elevator, however, had been badly damaged in the crash. After descending 5 stories down the elevator shaft, all the lift's cables, including the automatic braking cable, snapped, sending the elevator car into a free fall. With 20-year-old Betty Lou Oliver aboard, it plunged 75 stories to the basement of the building. Astonishingly, after being pulled free from the wreckage, Miss Oliver survived the fall. The fact that she survived the ordeal is likely due to a combination of the cable coiling up at the bottom of the shaft and a cushion of compressed air caused by the speed of the lift hurtling through the shaft, lessening the impact. Nonetheless, Betty Lou Oliver is recognized in the Guinness Book of World Records as being the record holder for the longest fall survived in an elevator at over 1,000 feet. As fortunate as she was to survive, she suffered severe burns, a broken pelvis, a broken back, and a broken neck. She later recalled the details of the death-defying fall. The elevator seemed to stop and shudder for a moment. Then it began plummeting downward. I tried desperately to stop it. Then a flash of fire enveloped me, and I raised my left arm to protect my face. The fire was gone in a moment, and I tried again to work the controls. I picked up the telephone in the cage and tried to call the starter on the ground floor. Nothing happened. I started yelling and pounding the floor. After a long 8-month recovery, Betty Lou Oliver was able to return to the scene of the accident. The body of the pilot, William F. Smith Jr., was not recovered until 2 days later. By that point, the Empire State Building was back open for business as usual. Though the structural integrity of the skyscraper was not affected, the crash caused $1 million in damages, which would cost nearly $17 million in 2023. 8 months after the disaster, the federal government offered money to the families of the victims in an attempt to offer restitution. Some accepted the cash offered by the government, but others were less obliging. A group of others filed a lawsuit against the US federal government, and as a direct result of the backlash over the crash, President Harry Truman signed the Federal Tort Claims Act into law on August 2, 1946, which, for the first time, gave private citizens the right to sue the United States government in federal court. Despite the terrible tragedy that occurred that day, it remains an amazing story of human resilience. Betty Lou Oliver lived to the age of 74, passing away in 1999. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this short documentary, please like the video and subscribe to my channel to help it grow. Until next time.